Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In elegant downtown New York, restaurant windows glittered under the streetlights. High society strolled by, each displaying their wealth with a mixture of confidence and arrogance. Among them, Madeline Clark, a successful and influential businesswoman, was a commanding figure, always impeccably dressed, her heels clicking on the polished parquet floors, her gaze sweeping the room with a mixture of judgment and superiority. That evening, Madeline was looking for a place to dine, but not just any place. She wanted a fashionable spot, where she could feel admired, where her money and status would be acknowledged. When she caught sight of the restaurant, Le Jardin d'Or, she knew she had found her stage. The glass walls offered glimpses of an elegant decor, waiters in impeccable uniforms, and tables adorned with perfectly pressed white tablecloths. As she entered, she scanned the room, her cold gaze meeting that of Emily Johnson, the young waitress in charge of greeting guests that evening. Emily, a young black woman with a warm but measured smile, greeted her politely. At that moment, Madeline felt a surge of arrogance. She knew that many people like her, young and inexperienced, trembled before her status. With a condescending gesture, Madeline sat down at a table by the window and beckoned Emily over. She was about to do what she did best: humiliate, belittle, remind the world that she was superior. Little did she know that this evening would turn into a lesson in humility. For behind the unassuming facade of this restaurant lay an unexpected truth: the owner, Alex Williams, was not a stranger, and Emily, the waitress she was about to insult, was the reason the restaurant enjoyed such a stellar reputation and commands such respect. The silence in the room seemed to hold her breath, as if she could already sense the turning point of her evening. And just as she was about to utter her first words of contempt, fate began to manifest itself in the form of a calm and confident smile, the one that would make Madeline Clark's arrogance tremble. Madeline Clark stepped through the glass doors of the Golden Garden like a queen entering her palace. The discreet tinkling of the bell announcing her arrival seemed almost like a fanfare to her ears. Her designer coat slid elegantly off her shoulders, and her stiletto heels clicked on the marble floor, drawing the attention of a few hushed customers. She glanced around the room, assessing every detail. The tables were impeccably set, the cutlery aligned with almost military precision, and the dim lighting reflected off the wine glasses like diamonds. But it wasn't enough for Madeline. Her cold gaze slid down to Emily, the young waitress who stood ramrod straight, a notepad in her hand, ready to take the order. "Very well," Madeline murmured to herself, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Let's see if this girl is up to the task." Without hurrying, she sat down at a table near the window, placing her expensive handbag on the next chair. She gestured for Emily to come over. The waitress advanced calmly, her movements precise and polite, but the tension in the room became palpable. Madeline stared at her condescendingly. "So, you're the one who's going to serve me tonight?" she said, her tone meant to sound light but thick with contempt. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I'm not in the habit of wasting my time with," she trailed off, a dry laugh escaping her lips. "Amateurs." Emily, though inwardly irritated, gave nothing away. "Of course, Mrs. Clark. Your order will be perfect." An eerie silence fell. The other customers, used to arrogant personalities but rarely confronted with such blatant arrogance, watched the scene with curiosity. Madeline, convinced of her power, didn't yet know that this evening would confront her with a reversal of pride she could never have imagined. Emily approached the table with a polite smile, but her posture remained firm and dignified. She knew her role: to provide impeccable service, even to difficult customers. Notebook in hand, she calmly noted Madeline's order, trying to ignore the condescending gaze directed at her. "What would you like this evening, Mrs. Clark?" asked Emily in a soft but clear voice. Madeline sneered, a cold, contemptuous sound. "Oh, I don't know, something refined, something that justifies this restaurant's exorbitant price. And above all, make sure it's quick. I don't have all day to waste with inexperienced waitresses." Emily felt a slight tension in her chest, but she took a deep breath and replied calmly. "Of course, madam." I will make sure everything is perfect. As Emily walked away to place her order in the kitchen, Madeline couldn't help but cast one last disapproving glance, watching the young waitress disappear into the distance. Let's hope this girl lives up to expectations, she muttered to herself, a smug smirk playing on her lips. But deep down, a little alarm bell was starting to ring in Madeline's mind. It wasn't the first time she'd underestimated someone who seemed fragile or docile. And, as often happened in her life, her arrogance was soon going to clash with a reality she hadn't anticipated. The kitchen buzzed with activity, the chefs preparing the dishes with meticulous precision. Emily walked confidently past them, carefully placing each dish on the table with an elegant and perfectly executed gesture. Every detail of her service demonstrated a skill Madeline hadn't anticipated. When Emily returned to the table to make sure everything was all right, Madeline felt a slight unease. It wasn't just the waitress's competence that unsettled her, but something about her quiet confidence, her silent dignity, that made her suddenly feel vulnerable, facing a world she believed to be entirely under her control. And just as she was about to open her mouth to utter another barb, a presence behind her caught her eye. An elegant man, with a noble and confident bearing, stepped into the room, his eyes fixed directly on Madeline. His gaze alone seemed to say, "Here, the rules are different." Madeline straightened in her chair, a mocking smile stretching her lips. She had this conviction, inherited from her status and wealth, that no one could put her in her place. She looked up at Emily, who was delicately placing the plate in front of her. "Honestly," said Madeline, her voice sweet but sharp, "you're supposed to be a professional? I've seen better in airport cafeterias. You could make an effort, couldn't you?" Emily, though hurt by the remark, remained calm. She placed her hands elegantly on the table and replied in a firm but respectful tone. "I do my best to provide the best service, Miss Clark. If anything is not to your liking, I can take care of it immediately." But Madeline didn't stop there. Her dry laugh echoed through the room. "Oh, darling, you have no idea what the word service truly means. In my world, amateurism is not tolerated." At that moment, something shifted in the air. The other customers, who usually ignored the arrogance of the wealthy, turned slightly, intrigued by the cold violence of Madeline's words. But Emily showed no weakness. Her gaze remained steady, her face impassive. She knew that every word, every gesture, mattered in this silent dance of power and respect. That's when Alex Williams made his entrance. Tall, elegant, but above all imposing with his quiet charisma, he walked towards the table with a slight smile. The room seemed to suddenly hold its breath. "Good evening, Miss Clark," he said in a calm but authoritative voice. "I am the owner of this restaurant. Alex Williams." Madeline froze. Her arrogant smile vanished instantly. She felt her heart clench. The name echoed in her head. She had heard about him countless times in high society. Alex Williams wasn't just a respected restaurateur, he was one of the most influential and admired men in the city. Her mind desperately searched for an escape. The insults she had just uttered now seemed trivial, almost laughable. Emily, standing beside the table, gave her a simple glance. No triumphant display, just calm and quiet dignity. At that precise moment, Madeline understood that her superiority had been an illusion. Power didn't come from money or status, but from competence, dignity, and the respect one earned. And Emily, silently, had just taught her a lesson she would never forget. Alex Williams stopped at Madeline's table, a slight smile on his lips but a serious look on his face. He placed his hands on the back of Emily's chair, as if to introduce her. "Emily manages this restaurant," he said calmly. "She makes sure that every customer is served with excellence." Madeline froze, her smile fading. Every word Alex said resonated in her ears like an echo of her own arrogance. She had imagined she would be the only one to impose her will, to bend others to her status and her money. But here, in this restaurant, she was confronted with a reality she had never anticipated. Competence and dignity triumphed over arrogance and contempt. Emily, always poised and calm, felt a surge of inner pride. She had always known her work deserved respect, but she had never had the opportunity to demonstrate it so clearly to such an arrogant client. Her heart pounded, but she showed nothing to Madeline. Every gesture, every professional smile, was a silent victory. Alex turned slightly towards Madeline, his gaze piercing. "Here, we don't judge people by their appearance, their wealth, or their status. Respect and competence are what count." Madeline felt the heat rising to her face. Her arrogance had met a wall of dignity and respect. She desperately searched for a word to redeem herself, but none came. Everything she had tried to do to humiliate Emily was now backfiring. Emily, gently placing the plate in front of Madeline, smiled calmly and confidently. This simple gesture, performed with skill and grace, was enough to show Madeline that she had been defeated not by force or anger, but by professionalism and dignity. Madeline, her hands trembling slightly, looked down at her plate. She felt strangely small, as if her whole world had been rearranged in an instant. Emily's pride shone brighter than her wealth and arrogance. And in that heavy silence, Madeline finally understood that true superiority was not measured by money or appearances, but by the way one treats others, even when no one is looking. Madeline remained frozen, unable to find a word. The silence that had settled around the table seemed amplified by her own discomfort. Every customer in the restaurant, even those who hadn't witnessed her previous remarks, seemed to sense the tension. The arrogance that had been her constant companion had just shattered in an instant. Alex stepped back slightly, leaving Emily to manage the table. But the mere presence of her name, associated with competence and respect, was enough to remind Madeline that she had no power here. She had tried to humiliate Emily, to demonstrate her superiority, and now she felt ridiculous. Emily, aware of her quiet victory, continued her service with calm and precision. Each gesture was a subtle lesson for Madeline, placing the dishes gracefully, explaining the menu's specialties clearly, and smiling with a quiet confidence that said, "I don't need anyone to validate me." Madeline, initially blushing with shame, felt her face freeze in an almost icy pallor. Her eyes slid to the other customers, seeking some form of support, but they were all focused on the perfection of the service, not on her. Her arrogance, which had always been her shield, was now her burden. She wanted to speak, to justify her behavior, but no words came. Even her wallet, a symbol of her wealth and power, seemed useless in this place where respect and competence were valued above all else. Emily, as she placed the last plate on the table, gave him a simple look, a mixture of calm, pride, and professionalism. It was a look that said, "You underestimated others and paid the price." In that moment, Madeline realized that the humiliation did not come from a violent gesture or a harsh word, but from a simple truth: superiority is never in arrogance, it is in the respect that one inspires by one's actions. And as she left the table earlier than expected, without a word, Madeline understood that this evening would remain etched in her memory. She had been confronted with a lesson that no amount of wealth or influence could buy. Madeline left the restaurant, her heart heavy and her mind in turmoil. She walked slowly along the sidewalk, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement, as she tried to understand what had just happened. Every gesture of Emily's, every word of Alex Williams's, came back to her with almost painful intensity. For the first time in years, Madeline felt that strange sensation, doubt. She had always believed that her money and status could get her anything, impose her will. But tonight, she had been confronted with a reality she could not ignore. Wealth and arrogance were not enough to earn respect. She thought back to Emily's quiet dignity, the way she smiled calmly despite the insults, her natural self-assurance. Madeline understood then that the humiliation she had intended to inflict had never affected Emily. On the contrary, it was Madeline who had been exposed, vulnerable and powerless in the face of the young waitress's competence and quiet pride. Alex Williams, for his part, embodied the ultimate lesson: a respected leader, capable of recognizing the talent and dignity of his employees, and of putting an end to the arrogance of someone like Madeline without raising his voice. It wasn't a confrontation, but a demonstration of moral strength. As she crossed the street, Madeline felt a strange mixture of shame and understanding. She had thought she ruled the world through her social standing, but she had just learned a crucial truth: respect cannot be bought, it must be earned. And Emily, with her simple integrity and professionalism, had just taught her a lesson that neither money nor power could have taught her. Madeline silently vowed never to judge anyone again based on their appearance or status. That evening marked a turning point. She hadn't just been humiliated, she had been awakened. Back at the counter, Emily let out a soft sigh of relief. The tension that had filled the room a few minutes earlier was beginning to dissipate, replaced by a respectful calm. She knew that Madeline Clark had been confronted with her own arrogance and that every action she had taken that evening had strengthened her sense of dignity. Alex approached her, a discreet smile on his lips. "Very well, Emily. You handled this situation with elegance." Emily nodded, but her smile was subtle. It wasn't vanity, but a deep satisfaction, the satisfaction of knowing she had acted with integrity despite the insults. She felt pride rising gently within her. She hadn't responded with arrogance or contempt, but with calm and competence. In the dining room, the customers resumed their conversations, some casting admiring glances at Emily. They had seen, even without knowing the details, how she had maintained her dignity in the face of an arrogant customer. Her upright posture, her confident gaze, and her measured smile had been enough to show that respect is not demanded, it is earned. Madeline, for her part, had left without a word. But every customer who saw her go silently felt the lesson she had just learned. Emily had won this moral battle without raising her voice, without showing hostility. Her victory lay in the consistency of her behavior, in the way she had embodied respect and competence. Alex placed a friendly hand on Emily's shoulder. "You should be proud. Not everyone can remain so calm and professional in the face of arrogance." Emily felt a surge of pride run down her spine. Tonight, she had shown that she was worth far more than the opinions of those who considered themselves superior because of their wealth or status. She knew that this evening would remain etched in her memory, not for Madeline's humiliation, but for the confirmation that dignity and professionalism always triumph over arrogance. Madeline Clark took a taxi home, her face grim and her hands clutching her bag. The city shone around her, but its usual brilliance failed to dispel the unease that had settled within her. Every memory of the evening brought her back to that precise moment when Emily had calmly and confidently placed a plate down, each gesture revealing a dignity Madeline had never imagined. She sat in her large apartment, surrounded by luxurious furniture and expensive works of art, and yet she didn't feel secure in that comfort. Money, possessions, status, none of it could repair the humiliation she had suffered in the face of the simple but implacable truth: respect cannot be commanded, it must be earned. Madeline remembered Emily's gaze, her upright posture, the way she remained impassive despite her arrogance. That single look had been enough to show her her mistake, and every word Alex Williams had spoken had reinforced that lesson. She finally understood that she had spent her life judging others by their appearances and social status, ignoring the true qualities that define a person. The silence of her apartment seemed to scream the lesson she had refused to see for so many years. She realized that this evening would not be forgotten, it would mark the beginning of a deep introspection, perhaps even a transformation. Madeline spent the night reflecting on her past attitudes, on the times she had belittled others to feel superior, on the occasions when she had believed that money could buy everything. She felt shame mingling with a new understanding: true power lay not in wealth or social standing, but in the respect earned through one's actions and dignity. In the early morning, as the light filtered through the curtains, Madeline took a deep breath. The silent confrontation with Emily and Alex Williams had changed something within her. She knew she couldn't go back, and that she had to learn to act differently, to value others for who they truly are, not for who she thought they were. A few days after the incident, Madeline Clark found herself at a social gathering hosted by her influential peers. She entered with the same elegance, but her mind was elsewhere. The evening was in full swing, frivolous conversations and shallow laughter echoing through the large room. But Madeline couldn't forget Emily's gaze, the quiet dignity of the young waitress, and the way Alex Williams had silently restored order. Soon, her friends and colleagues began to talk about the incident. Some had heard about the dinner and Madeline's disparaging remarks. The murmur in the room was clear: the wealthy and arrogant Madeline Clark had been confronted with her own arrogance by a waitress and a respected restaurant owner. Madeline's reputation faltered slightly. It wasn't a massive public humiliation, but enough for her to feel the impact of her actions. She realized that her attempts to dominate through status and money hadn't just failed that night, they had damaged how others perceived her. Meanwhile, Emily continued her work at the Golden Garden, but word of her professionalism and dignity began to spread. Customers spoke of her with admiration, acknowledging the calm and skill with which she had handled an arrogant client. She received increasingly sincere compliments and booking offers from customers eager to experience the exemplary service Emily embodied. Alex Williams silently observed this development, a slight smile on his lips. He knew that Emily had just gained much more than the respect of a single client. She had earned a solid reputation, forged by her integrity and dignity. Madeline, on the other hand, reflected on her actions and their impact. Every whisper, every discreet glance that alluded to her confrontation in the Golden Garden reminded her that she had been brought to heel not by force, but by the virtue and competence of others. And little by little, she understood that to regain true respect, she would have to change profoundly. A few weeks later, the Golden Garden still shone with its elegance and refined atmosphere. Emily Johnson, more confident than ever, greeted each customer with the same calm smile and dignity she had displayed that memorable evening. Her reputation as a competent and respectful waitress had spread far beyond the restaurant, and she now received sincere compliments, generous tips, and invitations to culinary events for her precision and professionalism. Madeline Clark, for her part, had begun a process of personal reflection. She realized that the arrogance and pride she had cultivated for years had led her to a silent but powerful humiliation. She understood that respect could not be bought or commanded, and that true power lay in how one treats others. One evening, Madeline returned to the Golden Garden, no longer to be seen, but to observe. She sat in a discreet corner and watched Emily serve the customers with impeccable professionalism. She felt a mixture of admiration and respect rising within her. For the first time, she understood that greatness was not measured by wealth or social status, but by dignity and competence. Emily, aware that Madeline was in the restaurant, gave her a professional smile, neither mocking nor arrogant, simply polite. This simple yet significant gesture confirmed that Emily's victory had never lain in humiliating others, but in self-control and integrity. Madeline nodded slightly in silent acknowledgement. She left the restaurant soon after, no longer angry or arrogant, but with a sense of having learned a lesson. This evening marked a turning point in her life, a reminder that true respect is earned through dignity and conduct, not wealth or power.